I have lots of questions about the beginning, about the first prototypes and everything. Uh, how did you test, and what kind of other gases did you test, and why did you choose argon at the end?
Yeah, well, luckily I've got a machine shop in my basement, so I could machine all of these things. I came up with the very first prototype, as I mentioned, in 98, 99, and it was very simple. It was a needle, it was a valve that would allow gas into the bottle and then allow wine out of the bottle. And then it was a regulator that controls the pressure of the gas that goes into the bottle, and then a capsule of inert gas. So those are the main components. That's all you needed. It looked a little bit like a medical device. It looked, or a weapon, as people have said. I still have that first prototype, and it worked. The first night that I used it, I was able to pour from 5 different wines. So it functioned, but it poured wine from a bottle. I didn't know whether or not the wine would last, and so I knew I had to experiment with all the main components. What is the pressure that I should set the regulator to that will push wine out of the bottle but not push the cork out of the bottle? What is the needle size and design of a needle that can go through cork repeatedly and not remove any material and allow its elasticity to close the hole? What's the size of the needle? What's the flow that I can get with that size? And what's the shape of the needle so it does the least damage? And coatings, which came up later. And then what was the gas? What is the gas that I should use to push the wine out of the bottle into my glass? Because I didn't want any air getting into the bottle while I'm pouring. So to displace the wine out, I had to put in gas. And so I got what was readily available. And I, as a physicist, I knew there were some inert gases. So I got helium and argon, both noble gases. I got nitrogen and carbon dioxide because those are used by wineries to push wine around in their winery to keep it, and also to clear bottles before they fill them with wine, to make sure there's no air in the bottle. And so those are my 4 gases. Helium was the first to fail, I think in part because my kids were breathing it. So it was hard to keep around. It's also expensive and a rarefied gas now. It's beginning to go away. So it's going to be more valuable in MRIs and keeping them cold. So walked away from helium pretty quickly. Argon, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide were all pretty effective. The problem that nitrogen and carbon dioxide have is that they tend to dissolve in a liquid. And so particularly CO2 would cause a little bit of spritz in the wine, and that's not okay for many wines. So CO2 fell away. Nitrogen and argon were the ones that I wound up testing for many years. And so I did these prospective clinical trials I was mentioning, and what I would do is I'd buy a half case of whatever wine it was that I was interested in, and then I would draw a glass out of a bottle and record the date, the gas, the needle, the pressure, and I would come back to that bottle at 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and 5 years, each time blind tasting against another bottle from that same half case, and always Coravining the glasses. So I had the other control bottles for my blind tastings. They became additional test bottles, so I could vary the gas, I could vary the pressure, and taste those all out over 5 years. And I remember at the time I was drinking a lot of Nebbiolo because of my wife, a lot of California Cab because I'm a Californian, a lot of Northern Rhone wines because I love Northern Rhone wines, and still love all of these that I've mentioned. And friends came over and they were like, okay, well, I'm sure it works with those wines. Those are tough wines, but it'll never work with red Burgundy, or it'll never work with Riesling, or it'll never work with Gruner, or it'll never work with white Burgundy, or it'll never work with Old Bordeaux, or it'll never work. And, whenever they said it would never work, I would buy a half case of whatever wine that was, and I would start it off in my test. And so by this declension into madness, I wound up with 800 different wines in my cellar, thousands of bottles, all under some version of test. I joked with my friends. I said, I have the world's largest wine by the glass program in my house.
And that's probably what's true.
Hey, have a glass of whatever. I don't care. And they started to see what I was doing and how I was drinking differently, and the freedom to explore wine that I had, that they did not have. They were still stuck in the tyranny of the 750 milliliter bottle. And so they asked me for prototypes. And I was like, sure, just pay me in wine. And so I made one for a good friend who was getting married. This is what led to the human use factor design that I had not paid any attention to. It's like, oh no, I'm going to give one to a friend. How do I make one where they can use it and, you know, everything's going to still work out? And so I made a pile of iterations, 15 different iterations, which is when the clamp, which now is on the product now, in our timeless product, that's when that evolved. I gave one to my friend Ryan Durant, who's the first guy to get a prototype, my good investor friend and partner who helped train me how to invent, a guy named Josh Macauer, now on our board at Coravin, gave him one. And they started to use and test. And all of them wrote back and said, you know, the way that I drink wine has changed completely. And then their friends would ask for one, and then more friends. And so I started by making one every month, and I was making one a week, and then I was making 5 a week. And my testing was done. It was working. And a friend of mine, Jeff Arnold, got very frustrated with me, and he took me out to breakfast, and he said, if you don't start a company, I'm starting it. And he wrote a check, and he said, here's my money. You write the same check. We're going to the bank down the street. We're going to deposit this cash, and we're starting a company today because you got to start. And I was like, oh, okay. So I knew that I had addressed my need. I knew that I addressed the needs of a couple of friends of mine. I wasn't at the time convinced that this was a huge opportunity that it turned out to be. And so I've been positively surprised by Coravin along the way.
So at the beginning, while doing all these testings, having 800 bottles in your cellar, doing all the prototypes, you didn't have this goal at the beginning to build this into a product to make a business out of this?
No,
just doing it for yourself and for wow, that makes it even more beautiful. Oh. That sounds amazing. Thanks for watching this video. You can watch the full podcast episode by clicking here, or watch another interesting video by clicking here. Let's continue the discussion in the comment section and see you in the next one.